Hennig discusses how single-player games are not dead. There's a growing concern among developers and players that single-player experiences might be left behind in favor of live games. But game designer Hennig discussed how that might be avoided during a recent interview with VentureBeat. Hennig is best known for her work on Legacy of Kain and the Uncharted games, where she developed and fleshed out characters layered and flawed. According to her, writing something that's simpler and more two-dimensional feels dated. When it comes to speculating about the future of single-player gameplays with a linear story and an interesting cast of characters, Hennig is not worried. She writes off the single-player is dead notion and explains that they are just becoming harder to pitch. I do not think anybody would say single-player is dead. Look at the current crop of games. It's just a harder and harder proposition, she says. So why is it becoming more difficult? Time and expectations. According to Hennig, we used to make games in a year. Jack 3rd we made in a year. Uncharted took 3, because we had to build the whole engine, she explains. Uncharted 2 and 3 both took 2 years each. That's unheard of anymore. 3 years is short. Right now you can already see that's a lot more expensive than it used to be. A lot of games are taking for around 5 years, sometimes more. Teams are bigger. The fidelity is higher. There is an apparent requirement, whether it's coming from publishers themselves, or players or whatever, that games have more features and are bigger. As Hennig has said before, she believes that if the FIRSTUNCHARTEDGAME were pitched today, it most likely would not be greenlit. The idea of a finite-ish other experience that has no second modes, no online. The only replayability was the fact that you could unlock cheats and stuff like that. No multiplayer, nothing. That does not fly anymore. But single-player games have something special that live games struggle with, Hennig says, and that's story. All of those things I do not know the word I am looking for. But they play less nicely with story. They are less conducive to traditional storytelling, she says. That has a shape and an arcade destination. At end, a game that is a live service that continues does not. Be sure to read the entire piece over at VentureBeat, where Hennig also talks about literary Easter eggs, her work on the Uncharted series, and more. It's definitely worth the read. Petcorp, developer behind PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, announced today that it will support its esports scene by introducing a profit-sharing program for team and league branded in-game items. The company will reportedly provide 25% of all NATIO NALPUBGLAGUE and PUBG European League item sales to each of the participating teams. This is an interesting way to offset the costs many new esports teams face when entering the league, especially when it comes to traveling, housing, and general operations, as explained in a press release. Further financial support is expected through additional profit-sharing opportunities for exclusive in-game items created for global events. 25% of those sales will be given to the participating teams there, on top of the regular profit-sharing program. Additionally, Petcorp will be matching each partner's prize pool to double the amount of money that's won, with more details to be shared at a later date. We are nothing without our teams and players, so it's critical that we develop these programs to support our competitive scene and help teams build their brands, Richard Kwon, CMOFPUBGCORP, said in a statement. In addition to building a popular esport that caters to our fanbase for years to come, we want to create a financially viable environment for players to sustain themselves and profit from their hard work. Netflix released Bandersnatch, its special Choose Your Own Adventure episode of Black Mirror a few weeks ago, and it has recently come to light that the interactive experience WASLOBCLY inspired by an actual video game of the same name. Chris Scullion of Tired Old Hack wrote up the rise and fall behind Bandersnatch, beginning by introducing the Liverpool-based development studio behind the endeavor, Imagine Software, comprised of Mark Butler, David Lawson, and Eugene Evans. The trio quickly gained a reputation for making quality games, including Arcadia, Zoom and Alchemist. Their success fostered the drive to create something bigger. So in early 1984, Imagine began placing teaser advertisements in magazines like KCVG, Crash, and Sinclair User for new games. The first one, Titlaps Eclipse, was being developed for the Commodore 64. The second game, Bandersnatch, was slated to be released for the ZX Spectrum. Scullion writes how the series of As became stranger and stranger over time, with its phrasing in an attempt to get players excited for the release. But they eventually died down to nothing but subtle ads showing logos. According to Scullion, readers still had no idea what kind of game to expect once the momentum died down. What kind of game was Bandersnatch? It was supposed to be an adventure game set in a futuristic city made up of old buildings, where the player took control of a character named Val, the retired officer of the Intergalactic Police. Its central mechanic, which was considered revolutionary at the time, would have players interacting with its various residents using the speech bubble system. According to Scullion, these thoughts would appear in bubbles and players could carry them out by pressing the fire button. However, a concept this detailed was going to be hard to fit onto the ZX Spectrum, especially since a Bandersnatch was considered a metagame. Games that would not usually be possible on the computers they were designed for. This was just one of the many issues which caused a downward spiral for Imagine, and the entire piece goes into more detail about the cancellation of Bandersnatch, so be sure to read it here. It's well worth it. Gamasutra editor Alex Worrell continues our annual series of year-end roundups by looking back at some of the big events that shook up the game industry in 2018. A lot of long-simmering game industry issues poured over in 2018, as we noted yesterday, while looking back at the trends that defined the games business this year. Many longtime studios executed big layoffs, shut down entirely. Unionization in the game industry is a hot topic again, and in 2018 game workers unite coalesced and seemed to focus years of chatter into meaningful statements and action. After years of giving chase, French-made giant Vivendi finally gave up on trying to acquire Ubisoft and sold off its entire stake in the company to, among others, Ubisoft, Tencent, and the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan. Iconoclasts finally came out. 2018 was a long one. Before we put it behind us, let's think about which bits we will still be talking about in the year ahead. Telltale Games was not the only studio to fall this year, but it was among the biggest and the most beloved. Despite clear signs of trouble, including reports of a toxic work environment, a big round of layoffs last year, and a legal fight with Avsted, Kiosk Brunner, it was still a shock when Telltale initiated its majority studio closure in September, effectively laying off over 200 people with no warning and no severance. They were not alone, either. Telltale's sudden shuttering happened within days of Capcom Vancouver, closing and Big Fish laying off over 100 people, meaning the game industry lost 2 big studios and over 500 jobs in the course of a week. In retrospect, this seems a particularly bad year for mass layoffs in the game industry. While Skybound Entertainment works to finish up Telltale's final working, that game with at least some of the original developers, the once beloved studio's abrupt shutdown and failure to pay workers what they are owed, inspiring at least one class action lawsuit, drove many to ask, will TDLTDLASFAILURA be a catalyst for industry reform? This year, Steam's polite dominance of the PC games industry appears shakier than ever, seen perhaps most clearly the week Valve announced it was formally creating new rev-share tiers that give big sellers a break by cutting its take on big earners. The standard 30% take drops to 25% on all post-September earnings over $10 million and 20% over $50 million. Valve seems to be making a serious play to keep top game makers from taking their work elsewhere in the years ahead. This has never been more viable, now that multiple publishers, including Bethesda, Ubisoft and Electronic Arts, and it comes right as Epic and Discord, are opening up their own online game marketplaces with much better rev share rates. Most importantly, Valve is making this concession to big game makers, even as smaller devs continue to struggle with discoverability problems in a market overflowing with remarkable games. Low-profile or niche games can, it's a leg at last in the mix.